months ago. This is a special tasting for me because I was thinking about this today, that when I became the sommelier at the original London Chop House, I will happily date myself.
Oh, thank you.
1985, right? And I remember that we were faithfully tasting through any Michigan wine we can get our hands on because we felt passionately that we were a wine producing state and we should represent it. So I remember pouring Vignole by the glass and serving Larry Mobby's Brut without telling anyone it wasn't French champagne at as reception wine at tuxedo affairs. So that said, I'm thrilled to have 4 people who are very prominent in the industry with us. So we've got Casey from Shady Lane. Casey, how do you pronounce your last name?
Wiersba.
Wiersba. Okay, I was going to spell it, so I'm glad I just...
There's a lot of consonants in that last name.
Wiersba, yes. We've got Sean O'Keefe from Mari. Want to wave, Sean? And yep, the hat, yes. And then we've got 2 folks from Balago. We've got Charlie Edson, the founder, and Blake. Blake, your last name is pronounced?
Wiersba.
No, it's not. Is it Loweed? Loweed.
Lougheed.
What is it?
Lougheed.
Lougheed. Thank you. So Charlie and Blake collaborate on winemaking at Balago, and they'll tell you in a little bit how that works. We could actually dedicate an hour plus to any one of these terrific people, but they're being generous enough to collaborate. And that I think is in no small degree a reflection of the spirit, quote unquote, up north, and I was telling them when we had a little meeting the other day on Zoom that the last time I really experienced that in a way that struck me was years ago. I was lucky enough to be in South Africa for a little while, and I was listening to winemaker panels, and they gave each other, a lot of hell. They were joking around, they didn't pull punches, and it was just wonderful collaboration. So I have a feeling that's what happens up north. So obviously Michigan wine is not just up north, but that's what we're doing today. And I'm happy to see that plenty of people have started taking trips or are planning trips. It's time for me to take a trip. I think it's been, God, I'm embarrassed to admit, 2 going on 3 years since I've been there. But I've asked them, to speak to us from the heart and tell us what's going on in their universe, how the landscape has changed, what they're working on these days, anything they really want to talk about. Because, especially for those of us who have been supporting Michigan wine for a long time, I probably have ideas that need to be refreshed. Couple things before I turn it over to them. They're going to speak to the whole lake effect and the terroir, but it's something that really is a thumbprint of what makes this growing region unique. There are different ways of referring to it, but one of you said inland marine climate, which I really like, and we sommelier types are always stressing how much, altitude and proximity to a body of water makes a difference, but we're usually talking about the Pacific, right? Or possibly the Mediterranean, but the Great Lakes are wildly unique. And I think Sean mentioned that he couldn't think of another place other than possibly Hungary that has such a dramatic lake effect that moderates the climate so they can do what they do. I was thinking about something too, in case you're going to take this ball at some point in time, but it's maddening for people like me who, consider it a happy responsibility to list wines, Michigan wines on wine lists. I'm so proud that our stores have significant Michigan sets. Isn't that great? That wall of wines, Michigan wines at West Bloomfield. And every time I ask Mike Pfeiffer about something, he saes he's bought it. we're one of the largest producers beyond New York and the West Coast. I don't know what the stats are. We've also been doing this for, as long as at least Oregon, and, maybe post-dating the Finger Lakes. If you get a chance, I just read a spectacular interview that Sean gave to the Wine Collective, and I'm going to forward it in our follow-up notes. I strongly suggest you read it. I mean, sorry to embarrass you slightly, Sean, if you are, but it's really sort of a lovely masterclass in Michigan wine. I just adored it. And I just had this thought today. Nobody gives growing regions like Germany a hard time because they don't produce Napa-style Cabernet, right? I mean, it's just absurd for people to, bemoan the fact that there aren't more big reds coming out of, our wine growing region up north. I think it's, at best funny, right? However, there's a lot more red wine produced than there used to be. And I know they're going to talk to that as well. Sean actually at one point said, I can't make enough red. I don't have enough red grapes. So that's a cheerful thought. In struggling to decide what we were going to serve today, because I went eeny meeny on the three producers, I think we ended up with a nice new expression. I love the fact that we're going to show Gruner Veltliner, which some of you love to call Grudy. I love the fact that we're going to show Mari's Bestiary Ramato, and Sean's going to tell us all about it, but it's got a neat color and it smells very cool indeed. And then finally, I've been a champion of Belagos, Auxerrois, and Pinot Noir for a very long time. So the thought of doing it with bubbles just utterly cheered me up, and it's the perfect time of year. So that said, what we're going to do is this. Instead of giving everybody 15 minutes to, talk on, we're gonna alternate a little bit. Everyone's gonna give a snapshot of themselves and their winery, what's going on there now, and what they're focusing on. Then we'll taste each of the wines in the order I put in the chat room. We've got the Gruner, then the Bubbles, and then the Ramato. And then finally, we're going to finish up with, I gave them very specific direction to talk about any damn thing they'd like to talk about, and sharing with, a group of really avid consumers and trade people, because you've got at least 20% of us on belong to the trade, whether it's on premise, off premise, or wholesale. So that said, I'm going to maybe show some pictures, but I want to first turn to Casey, who I wanted to. Oh, by the way, you can put yourself on speaker view, and that way you can see whatever pictures we're showing. And I just like showing pictures, and we have a couple of maps, and Casey actually started me out with a terrific map that I'm going to show right now.
Okay,
Casey?
I just learned what speaker view is.
Did it work? Yay.
It worked!
Oh my God, you know what? And if I'm the tech genius in this group, we're in big trouble.
We could be in trouble.
I was giving, I have to tell you, minor pivot, but I was giving a blind tasting exercise to 100 business people a few days ago, and I lost internet access in the middle of it. So that was, I was very proud of myself that I didn't have a heart attack, and I got back on, yay. So Casey Wiersba, did I say it correctly?
Yes, yes.
Has been the winemaker at Shady Lane since 2013, correct? And you were—
Well, initially I was the assistant winemaker, and then
Yes.
since 2016.
You are
At
an
the
honest
helm.
human, but you've been touching the wine since 13, and
Yes.
you, correct me if I'm wrong, are a Traverse City native, but after you got multiple degrees from Michigan State in viticulture and horticulture and such, you went to California for several years. And I was very impressed that you worked at Frog Sleep as a viticulturist, correct? And then you've also
Yes.
worked at Farniente and their sister winery, Nickel and Nickel and Rudd. So I'm glad whatever it was that pulled you back to Michigan, and I have a feeling your family had something to do with it, that you're back with us, because you know, I have been hearing your name with a big smile from many sources for the last few years. So everyone's happy to have you there. You're going to tell us all about your winery, but it surprised me that the production is tidy. It's small. It's like, you know, what, 5,000 cases or something like that.
It's currently about 6,000. We've been up to 7,000 in the past, and so we make more fruit here than we actually, or we grow more fruit than we actually produce. So we're moving into hopefully producing wine from all the fruit we grow here.
Now, when you pulled this together, and thank you for that, your winery is actually located about there. Is that correct?
Yes, it certainly is.
Yes, but this is the fruit source, which is cool. And then Balago Winery is located right across Lake Leelanau from you. And I mean, I'm no expert at this, but I think I have it vaguely correct. But there's the Ozerois source. And then Mari, Pinot Grigio and Mari Winery are in one and the same place. Thank you for providing this. And then I just decided, here we go. That's beautiful winery. It's just gorgeous. I pulled these together just so we can see where you're located in relationship to everyone else, and the lakes. So tell us what you've been up to.
So well, right now, and I'm sure that the other producers can talk a little bit about where their plants are, but currently we've just finished up pruning and tying all of the vines, and our buds are still pretty tight. Usually Cabernet Franc is actually the first variety for us to start like swelling and unfolding. And right now those buds are kind of in that swelling stage. So all of that off-season work, winter work has just come through in the nick of time, and we should be seeing a lot more bud swelling and little leaves unfolding from the buds very soon. So that's always exciting. It's, you know, the cyclical pattern of nature and growing something and making a product that's directly tied to that is just, it's one of the things that I love about winemaking, and I'm sure that Sean and Charlie and Blake also do too.
Now, you came on board after the relatively new ownership, a gentleman by the name of Richard Fortune, correct?
Yes.
From Indiana, purchased it in 2013, because we've certainly known of the winery for a while. And I know later we'll talk about the Hennessy vineyard, but I read today that was named after his mom, because his family used to come up here since the mid 30s and vacation here.
Yes.
So did you convince them to plant Gruner Veltliner, or was it already planted?
He had already owned that vineyard, which was already planted before he purchased the winery. So kind of, you know, moved into this like, well, it would be wonderful to have somewhere to make my wine, and ended up acquiring more vines and more acreage, because here at the winery property, which has our tasting room on it as well, there is 100 acres in the whole expanse, 2 old historic farms, and then 53 acres planted. So we have 53 acres here of estate grown vineyard, and then another 13 at the Hennessy property.
Which is right, further north. And this was the original building, correct? And then I think, didn't you talk him into building this guy here?
I certainly did, because in 2016, which was my first year at the helm of the ship, we were about 30% overproduction in that original building, and I had wine coming out of my ears in that building. It was,
that's right. You said you had like an event tent.
We had an event tent with barrels in it, and it was quite the sight. Yeah, we were shoving wine in every place we could, and putting up tarps and all these sorts of things. So.
But you had to do a major pivot coming from California after several years to, you know, a climate that was wildly different. Was it traumatic or exciting or both?
A little bit of both. You know, it wasn't, because I grew up here, it wasn't a total shock. So when I was at Michigan State, I did two different internships, one for Black Star Farm, and then another one for a farming company that had a lot of different clients at the time, and we were planting a lot of different vineyards. Craig Cunningham was the owner of that company, and just a wealth of knowledge and experience. And so I worked for those two businesses, and so I kind of had my toe dipped in the water of cool climate, viticulture and winemaking. But it's so interesting now to just think about the challenges that each wine, well, that those two different wine regions face, and how they're vastly different.
We don't have fires, yay. Right?
Thank goodness we don't have fires. Mother Nature gives us intermittent irrigation during the summertime. I mean, we're really blessed with like all the key attributes that make this wine growing region so fantastic.
I liked it when Sean asked you if the owners started giving you range for change. Your response was, they know my personality, creative cautiousness. And I think that, you know, that's really cool because obviously you're aware of the business aspect of it also. And, you know, you don't get to play unless that part of it works. But what are you doing right now that's most exciting to you? Is there a particular like wine you're making, or a cuvee that we're going to talk about the Gruner in a minute, which I have to tell you is the Austrians would admire it. It's Gruner Veltliner.
Thank you. That's a huge compliment. We just got done with a pretty extensive bottling. And prior to that, we were putting together our 2018 Cabernet Franc blend for it. So there's nothing more special than being able to spend, a whole day in your barrel room, tasting barrels, making notes, putting on different music to just keep your brain active and running through it. And I have a great assistant winemaker, and it's fun to just taste through those together. And that's kind of like the finishing strokes on the masterpiece is doing that, and that kind of makes the job like completely worthwhile.
I'm going to introduce the two guys who are here from Belago, but I wanted to mention to everyone that Casey went out of her way to make sure that all four of them had each other's wines. So they're tasting together, which is very cool indeed. I have a dear friend, if you haven't met her before, Amanda, will you wave? Amanda Danielson is restaurateur extraordinaire in Northern Michigan. And one of the best sommeliers I've ever played with. I think the way that you mentor your staff, and you always keep your eye on the ball on quality and teamwork. Love it, Amanda. Stella. If you haven't been there, it's about time. So we are lucky enough to have the duo of Charlie Edson and Blake Triffon. I'm still not going to try your last name because I'm going to kill it. And I was joking with Blake that I couldn't find much background on him, but he is, well, Charlie and Blake are going to define how their winemaking responsibilities work, because Blake is currently probably doing the lion's share of the physical work. Charlie is, Charlie, you're a legendary figure in Michigan, and I'm just going to say it. Thank you for bringing a lot of Pinot Noir clones here, and for some odd reason, Auxerrois, but you'll tell us about that. But the winery was founded in the late 1990s, and it enjoys terrific consumer recognition. Talking about scholarship, you have a PhD, correct, in viticulture, and also from Michigan State, if I've got my stats right. And you spent a significant time in Missouri, but then came back.
That's true.
Yep, you had decided at an early age that Leelanau was where you were going to land. And the Lago is still almost 100% estate fruit, thanks to you and your family who founded it. And there is new ownership, which you can tell us about, but from the sound of it, it is a happy, benign occurrence. So it's allowing Del Lago to continue to flower in the direction that makes you and Blake happy. Blake, will you wave so everyone knows who you are? There he is outside, and now we can hear you nicely. And I did manage to find out that he did study to be an engineer, and he is, you are solely responsible for the terrific ciders that you're making there in addition to the wine. And we're very happy to have you with us. He was busy bottling the other day when we had our little meeting, so thank you for making the time for this. So, gentlemen, maybe if you don't mind, Charlie, can I turn to Blake first so he can set the stage about what he's doing today? Is that okay with you?
Could I just make one comment?
You can make any comment you like.
So Marshall just put up a little message that talked about Norton in Missouri.
Mm-hmm.
And for those of you that don't know Norton, it makes a really interesting red wine. I fell in love with Norton, and we grow 100 different varieties of grapes because we're so interested in learning more about different varieties and how they might do here on Leelanau Peninsula. We have one vine of Norton. So I'd sort of forgotten about that till I saw that little slide. We've used Norton. It's such a late ripening grape. We've used Norton in 2007 and 2012. Other than that, it's never gotten ripe. But it's a real disease-resistant grape, which is why I was interested.
Norton is Missouri's claim to fame. It's a red grape, isn't it? I went there once and tasted through a slew of them, and I enjoyed them very much.
Yeah, so with that, I'll turn it over to Blake.
Okay, Blake, it's great to meet you, and it's really nice to have you with us. I'm just curious to hear what's going on with you these days. What are you directly involved with? How much of the workload is yours? And who is this handsome critter? Is that your doggy?
Yeah, I see him on the screen, but it's confusing because he's also running around. So.
Oh, is he really?
I don't know if you guys have seen him popping around, but I am Blake, and you mentioned I studied engineering at Michigan State University as well. So Charlie had a connection there, and he showed some interest in me about 10 years ago when I was just working what I thought was a brief stint in the industry. Well, after college, I was looking for engineering opportunities, and then started working for Charlie, and moved in with my grandparents up here, and I subsequently purchased their cottage where I live now, and kind of just fell in love with the area and doing wine. So I'm sort of stuck here now. But
happily from the when did you start working there?
The 2011 vintage was the first stuff I was involved with at Bellago, and then it's just been a progression, like every day a little bit more responsibility that Charlie trusted me with to some extent, and then eventually I've been able to kind of help Charlie step away to some extent because he's I don't want to say he's getting old or anything, but he deserves to retire at some point in his life. So I'm just helping transition smoothly from his devotion to quality over the years, which was very clearly defined since day one. That's what we're trying to do here, is make a statement of quality at no cost. You know, it's more expensive, a lot more work in the vineyard and in the cellar, but the goal is to not take any shortcuts. But Charlie kind of obviously started the reputation here, and I'm just trying to help keep that going on. And obviously we still utilize his expertise, and we're involved whenever we can. It's just a little bit more me and him not having to bottle and stuff anymore. So we enjoy our time tasting wines when it's necessary, and always, having fun doing that.
And this gentleman in the middle is this Tomas?
Yeah,
Your
so that's the vineyard manager he's worked here longer than me. He's a bit older than me, but it's the same thing. He kind of came up under Charlie's wing and also under his own father. So Charlie hired Tomas Sr. many years ago, and then the responsibility is passed to Tomas, who manages all the vineyard. But yeah, we have a commitment to trying to make lots of red wine here, and we focus on extensive barrel aging. Hopefully by the time we release all these wines that we have been squirreling away, we have potentially more red wines than any winery in Michigan, and possibly some of the better ones. I got some colleagues here that also make great red wine, but Michigan's not necessarily been known for red wine over the years, and that's kind of our new mission here.
I wanted to show this because, first of all, you have like around 8 ciders on tap here, and also this is a spectacular. This picture isn't doing it justice, but if you go to their website, this beautiful piece of art is made from corks, and I think you.
We did that ourselves as well. With Charlie and I and some of the crew kind of pieced together that cork board, I think maybe 4 years ago. With some extra corks we had lying around.
Yeah, like thousands.
So yeah, like a little over 10,000 of them, I think.
Pretty amazing stuff. Thank you for painting the picture of what you bring to the table. And I think there's probably gratitude on both sides of the table. And though I'm sure the two of you get annoyed with each other occasionally, it would be really unnatural if you didn't. But how great that you can collaborate so nicely. Charlie, what are we staring at here? This is your North Farm, right?
Yeah, this is a picture of the upper part of the North Farm. You can sort of see that there's two main levels. What you see at the top is a really high hill. It's about 950 feet above sea level there. So it's a really high site. This on top here is a beautiful south slope that's fairly steep, and the lower end is not quite as steep, but we've grown, and this is the same thing from the other end. This is a gorgeous picture, and so that little square, the rectangle that comes out, that's all Pinot Gris, and then to the right is some Chardonnay and Riesling, and our Pinot Noir is off to the left. Our Auxerrois is growing down in the lower block, and then the what we call the middle block, those darker green vines to the south there. But it's a really beautiful site. From the top of the hill, you've got views of West Bay, and you've got views of Lake Michigan. And so we always get really nice ripe fruit from this site, and we've been really pleased with it.
I wanted to show this one. You had sent me this because you've got interspersed vines. This is Auxerrois, and this is Cayuga, right? Did I get that right? Yeah.
You did. Yeah. Yeah. I'm not, to tell you the truth, when we planted those, I'm not quite sure why we split up the Cayuga. I actually don't recall. It's been too many years ago. So you mentioned the tasting room was built in 1998. We actually planted vines back in 1986. And so we've been growing vines for quite a while on the peninsula, not quite as long as Sean and his family have been, but we started out with planting a variety block, trying to figure out what would grow well for us here on Leelanau Peninsula. And we planted Auxerrois in that early first vineyard. So we planted our Auxerrois was planted quite a while ago. And I actually discovered personally Auxerrois on a trip to Alsace. And as soon as I learned what an early ripening variety it was, and I tasted the wines, which I really loved, which as many people on this call know are typically blended with Pinot Blanc in that part of the world. I really fell in love with the variety. And so we started out making a more traditional barrel fermented version, but we use neutral oak barrels. They are all French oak, just in case a little bit of oak squeaks through. But
well,
our
I've been
goal-
drinking it with enthusiasm over I don't know how many vintages, and I always love the mouthfeel, and I always, you know, the whisper of white Burgundy always floats through my head. So
oh yeah,
take that where you want. But if you don't mind, I'm going to let Sean say hello. Otherwise, we're
Sure.
not going to get to the wines. Everyone, by the way, please taste whatever you've got. You know, whether you've got all three or one of them, or you're surreptitiously drinking red, that's okay too. You know, there's no wine police. Sean, thank you for wearing your hat. Now I'm going to recognize you from a distance whenever I see you because it's singular. And I have to tell you, when I think of you, I think of the first word that immediately comes to my mind is Riesling, because I think some of the Rieslings I've had from Northern Michigan, when I put my nose in the glass and it was an aha moment, were from your hand. So please know what a sweet thought that is. And I know that you're playing with a lot more grape varieties these days. You know, if you've, you know, heard of O'Keeffe, you've probably heard of Sean's beloved late father, Eddie, who passed away recently. And I think he's smiling down at us absolutely with a couple of glasses of wine in front of him for sure. And he was one of the very first people to ever plant grapes in this area, period. Correct. And we're talking at a time when it didn't make financial sense. And we're talking Riesling and Chardonnay, which nobody had done. And we're talking vinifera, and we're talking, you know, several, you know, a lot of acreage, what, like 40, 45 acres initially. I learned something about you today I didn't know. I knew you were hanging out with the German Riesling guys, you know, and you're tight with them, but I didn't know that you had such a personal connection to Germany and that you went to school there.
Yeah.
Fantastic. No wonder you got so close to some of these people who were absolute stone leaders, you know, of Riesling winemaking. What, Schloss Johannesburg, St. Urbanshof. I have a horrific German accent, and Ernie Lozen. But I will remind us all that Sean is one of the brains and hearts behind City of Riesling that went on for what, 3 years, and hopefully it will be resuscitated because it was a wonderful collective. And I'm just happy to have you here, and happy for you to tell us, you know, about Mari, which is relatively new. What, fifth or sixth anniversary? And this was the owner of Mari, what was a fast friend of your father's. So this was to a degree a kind of organic happening. You're becoming the winemaker there. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, I guess in retrospect.
I didn't say graceful. I said organic.
Well, I mean, the
Yeah.
second story in the Western canon is about two brothers trying to farm and hunt together. So,
Right.
No, I went to school. I caught the wine bug a little bit later in life. You know, I went to school at U of M and studied Russian and German literature, and very useful degree.
Oh, I
And,
studied theater, which is even more useful.
So I decided to go over to Germany and perfect, actually learn how to speak German after studying it for 4 years. And I went with our first winemaker from Chesel Travers, Roland Flager, in a little town called Herxen am Berg in the Pfalz region of Germany. And then I matriculated to Geisenheim, which is what I consider like the equivalent of the Hogwarts of Riesling. It's all these families that have been making Riesling forever, some newer ones, but.
Was it intimidating? Was it, it had to be thrilling, actually.
Well, I had the ability to, yeah, I mean, I'm still unpacking when I learned there because it was all, the classes then were all taught in German, and learning biochemistry in German can be a little tiring. I mean,
No kidding.
But anyways, I was there in the early 90s when the German Riesling started drying out, and some of the, just what Germany's doing now was just getting going, and it was a really exciting time. I came back to my family's winery, and I made some pretty cool wines alongside our winemaker, Baron Croissant there. And I carved out some wines that I did, like a whole cluster in lot 49 that Jancis Robinson liked so much. And all
That was the one that stopped me in my track. And I remember her comment when that was published. Didn't she said something glorious, like it was the best Riesling she'd had in recent memory from the New World. Yay.
Well, it was a blind tasting at the Australians version of the, much bigger than the city of Riesling, but it was against all the, the Grosses Gewächs and all the top ones. And when they revealed what the wine was, everybody was all excited about. Like there was like Australian winemakers holding their hearts and Germans and all that from Michigan, and so it was a great moment. I was very happy about that. Yeah, I moved on to Mari. I was making wines for Marty Lagana as a side project. He planted a lot of vineyards on all the land that he owns out here in the Old Mission Peninsula. And
this is the winery being built, right? And this was named after his grandmother, if I have this right, Teresa Mari, right?
So he had a lot of vineyards planted that we bought the grapes at Chesler Travers, but he also had red grapes that he was really pushing. And I'm famously on the record saying that people are probably wrong and misguided to be fixing reds in this area. So yeah, so be careful.
And he brought in what? Nebbiolo, Sangiovese, and Schioppettino and Tirol de Go. Great, yes.
Brine, Malbec,
Yeah.
Bordeaux, it goes on. Rofosco, Nostrana. To make a long story short, I was making wines for his red wines on the side as a little project. And when creative differences came about, I was consulting to hire a new winemaker for Mari, and I advised him to hire me because I saw what Marty was putting into this place, and there's the same amount of effort, time, money, and silliness of like that makes no financial sense that my dad did when he started Chateau Grand Travers. And I was able to help design the cellar in the winemaking program and do all the things I always wanted to do, where the wines are 100%, zero exceptions, every drop from grapes that we grow. I'd say about 95% of our wines have no residual sugar. Maybe we're making too many different kind of wines because we planted too many different things, but it's kind of a fun problem to have. I kind of would have liked to have been growing just Gamay and Riesling.
Yeah, but you are not resting on your laurels, sir. You are in a vertical learning climb, which is spectacular.
I'm a different winemaker now. I'm making orange wines. And, who knows? I'll probably be making Piquette at some point. I hate those wines, but guess what? Every time I say that, I'm like,
you end up doing it. Everyone, go to their website, the Mari website, and troll around and look at the recording of how they built these cellars, because they were created, and it's quite extraordinary. Okay, cool. I'm going to make us taste wine, or you're all going to be annoyed with me. So Casey, can you come back to us and tell us about this Gruner Veltliner?
Yes, I'm back. So I mentioned the property that's on that's west of us here, west of our original property at the tasting room and winery. And Madeline kind of gave it a nice intro. We call it Hennessy Vineyard, and that's the maiden name of the owner's the owner's mother's maiden name.
Yes.
There we go.
Mm-hmm. The owner's mother's maiden name. So we're that's right. Jane Hennessy Fortune. That's what it.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. So this picture that's up right now, this is a picture of that vineyard from the upper half of it. And this vineyard came on in production just as it was in its fourth leaf. It's planted in 2012, just as I came to the helm of Shady Lane. And so I was given a couple different varieties that we had never made here before at Shady Lane. So, or at least not in recent years, Gruner being one of them, and then Pinot Grigio and as well as Chardonnay is also at this vineyard. But this site is just a magical place. One, it gets no cell reception. So if I want to go and hide, I come here. And it's tucked in between South Lake Leelanau and Lake Michigan, the big lake. And I just think the significance of of those two bodies of water really play into being able to grow these grapes at this site.
And these are south-facing slopes, right? Which
It's
also helps a lot.
Yeah,
Mhm.
it's this fantastic southerly facing slope. It receives all day sunshine. It's kind of hard to see. I wish this was like a professional photograph. It's actually not.
It's pretty
from,
gorgeous, Casey. It's okay.
it's not too bad from an earlier version of an iPhone. So, yeah. Yeah,
I want
and
to
so
interrupt
then
just for a sec, is that the south-facing slope thing is a big deal. You've got people in regions that are being affected by climate change in the form of global warming who are like planting intentionally north-facing slopes to mitigate the heat. So, you know, this is a happy thing
So,
here.
yeah, the flip side in a cool climate is finding those southerly facing slopes. And Madeline, go just sneak right back to it, because I want to point out all of that whiteness. That's all fog that has rolled in the fall.
Wow.
Yeah. So just the change in temperature between the air temperature to the soil, and having that fog accumulate and kind of come in is makes it a cool picture. But
so tell me how you feel about Gruner Veltliner. And you know, if I can just describe the aromatics, if you don't mind, because I'm less intimate with it than you are. But I mean, I was telling these guys before everyone got on that I am very glad that I don't have to take a blind tasting exam that includes Gruner Veltliner, because it's not always easy. It doesn't have often, it's not a loud thumbprint, you know, and you have to kind of back into it. But this has an aromatic that just made me grin, because my association with Gruner is like ginger, you know, either stem ginger or ginger ale, and radishes. And also Casey was saying an herbal component. And I just love the fact that it's intensely fruity with no RS.
I love that radish component, because I've never been able to put my finger on it.
Like, have you ever eaten white radishes? White,
yes,
you know, and there's a little bit of a
fresh
phenolic
and
tannic
juicy.
Thing. Yes,
but also with that phenolic component, and that kind of like, you know, Gruner has this tall tale sign of being Gruner when it shows that white pepperiness, which in this wine,
right.
Yeah, it comes through as more of like a floral component. So I know sometimes I go crazy when I'm cooking with the white pepper, because the holes in my shaker are too big and it like poops in my face. And I'm like, oh yeah, Gruner Veltliner. Like that's it, that very like poofy kind of floral aspect of,
and this has like
pepper.
It's got some nice weight. If you hold it on your palate, you know, it's mouth filling, but there's no oak on this, correct? It's extended lees, or is there's neutral oak on it at all? Do you have any neutral oak on it?
There's no oak, but yes, extended fine lees contact for aging and stainless steel. This one was 8 months on the fine lees, with a little bit of lees stirring, but not too much. We start off doing a little bit of lees stirring and then kind of back off as the wine matures and ages. And
I think it's absolutely delicious, perfect for this time of year. You know, it's got weight, it's got personality, it's aromatic, it's got a little, we said phenolic, I call it like white wine tannin, you know, that comes from skin contact. And Sean's going to talk to that as well. But, you know, yes, salad wine. But when I say salad wine, I mean great extra virgin olive oil and lemon, right? And salt and pepper,
well, and, you know,
and bitter greens, right? Right.
Exactly. Yeah, but the Austrians like they drink this with Spätzle and Schnitzel, like, because it has that ability to, you know, to cut that fat and to cut that richness. So we really can, you know, pair it with anything. Are
you having good luck selling this? Has this been successful for you?
It has been. You know, it's kind of more of like a guided sale or hand sale to just get people tasting it. Once they've tasted it, they're hooked. What's really cool about this wine is that that Shady Lane, as well as Mari makes a Gruner, a couple other producers up here. It's an unknown variety. We're for the most part, we're introducing this variety to people for the first time.
And it is Austria's signature grape. I mean, people make a big deal, about Austrian Riesling, which to me is glorious, but it's like, what, 2% of their wine production. So we don't get to see that much Austrian Riesling, but we see plenty of Gruner Veltliner, or Groovy, as we say in Somland,
I love
at
Groovy.
different price points. So thank you for making it. And I'm going to go ahead, if you don't mind, and pick up a glass of the Bubbles. The Belago, and Charlie and I were talking about this. I call it Auxerrois because I think that's how the French pronounce it. But you know what? There's no pronunciation police here. And if you want to call it Auxerrois, that's okay. How long have you guys been making the bubbly Auxerrois?
This is only our second vintage. So we started making bubbles with Auxerrois in 2017.
It's very successful. Can you just you or Blake talk about it a little, the production method or what you were after, and if you're happy with it? It seems bone dry to me, but it's got a really nice soft mousse.
Well, I'll start and then let Blake finish.
Mm-hmm.
So we started, the cuvee is 90% Auxerrois and 5% Chardonnay and 5% Pinot Noir. And we added the Pinot Noir and the Chardonnay just to sort of fill out the body of the wine.
There's the Pinot, right? That's Pinot.
That's Pinot, yeah. Mm-hmm. And just to add a little interest. And so we started out with that idea, and it worked out so well that we've carried it forward. So this is only our second version of this. But I agree with you. I love this wine. It's really, really nice.
It's friendly, it's easy, thank you for making it dry.
You're welcome.
It's a killer, easy drinking alternative to something that you would reach for when you're not in the mood to invest in champagne, because it is, really like premium Prosecco in terms of value. And I think you've placed it perfectly. And it's a style that's mouthwatering, but not austere. Blake, do you want to talk to it at all?
Yeah, I just want to say, for people that don't know, the grape is genetically a sibling of Chardonnay, mm-hmm. and I think it's got similarities, but it's also got many things that make it unique. And traditionally, Charlie, for many years, fermented it in the barrels, neutral oak, and created a texture-driven wine, which is great, but this grape's super versatile, and you can do that. But in 2017, we realized as some new plantings were coming to fruition that we just had more Auxerrois than we needed to barrel ferment because.
And you were making two still Auxerrois at that point, right? No, because you were making the regular and then the reserve level?
Not yet.
Okay.
In 2017, we had enough wine to make nearly 1,000 cases, but it was cropped pretty heavy in some sections, and it would have been ridiculous to make that much barrel fermented stuff. So the same year we went from making always one per year. In 2017, we did a stainless barrel fermented and the bubbly, and they were all very successful and very different wines. And it's really cool to be able to, you see Tomas in the vineyard there, but we can have certain chunks of the vineyard that we crop pretty high, knowing they're going to bubbly, and
harvest those earlier. This is the tier you're harvesting here. Is that correct?
Yes. So this is a modified, what's called a modified Scott Henry training system. And so if you look at the line of grapes that you see here, those shoots all grow up and those feed the upper tier with photosynthetes. And then we've just harvested, you can see the greener, slightly less ripe fruit that just came off of another row of grapes that run just below that upper row. And those are fed by the lower leaves. And so it really creates a wall of foliage to feed the entire, and that shows it pretty
It's
well.
a hell of a picture. That's a gorgeous picture.
And you see that little window that lets light into the grapes for ripening and flavor development. And so that lower tier typically hangs behind the upper tier with respect to ripening. So we pick that lower tier for bubbly, and then we save the upper tier for the still wine.
Still wine.
And then we've got another block that we grow on a different training system, and that generally goes into the barrels now. So
now this picture doesn't have anything to do with the Auxerrois, but we agreed to show it because it speaks to sustainability, which is hugely important to a lot of you folks up there.
It certainly is. Sean put through a little note that they're going organic, and we're certainly moving in that direction. And this is Pinot Noir, one of the other loves of my life, wine wise, and it's Queen Anne's lace, and it does demonstrate that, and we're happy about that.
Well, thank you for making this year 2. Yay! Keep going. And I'm now going to turn to this fierce creature. Sean, before you talk about the wine, can you tell us about him?
So the bestiary wines are not just the Ramato. I make I have an Ambra in the works, and I have a red that I did also under this label. And bestiaries were these books in the early Renaissance and mid-Renaissance. I consider them like the coffee table books of the gentry. They usually had some like these fantastic animals. Sometimes it'd be like normal animals, like a snake or a shrew or an eagle, and it'd have some kind of homily to it. Like, the eagle is a wonderful creature. It, flies next to the Lord and the sun, whereas the mole digs itself in the earth and averts its eyes from the gloriness of the Lord, and that kind of stuff. But I really think that the books were meant for these fantastic drawings, and people just had those things that could justify them. And to make, I always digress. So when they did animals that were really close to Europe, they drew them very realistically. When they started veering out to animals from sub-Saharan Africa or India, I don't know if they were drawing from like bad taxidermy, or they just kind of went with it. But the creatures got more and more distorted over the farther away from where they came from. So when I was making these kind of wines that are inspired from wines of Georgia and Northeast Italy and Slovenia and Southern Austria, I felt that was kind of weird that I'm making these kind of styles of wine all the way here in Michigan, and by the time it gets here, it's going to be somewhat distorted. So I found one of these old drawings from, this is a 300 or 400-year-old drawing, and made our wines, and it's just some kind of weird creature that is an approximation of what those wines are like in Northeast Italy. Does that make sense? It does.
I think the spirit of it makes complete sense, especially considering you're tying it in with a production that is, part natural, part ancient. Can I do the short version of defining orange wine? This is not a rosé, by the way. I love saying overstating the obvious. This is made by extended skin contact with white grapes, and we're talking from anywhere up to a year, depending on who's making it. And this, historically could be done in clay vessels, amphora and such. Sometimes those vessels were buried. There's a producer in Friuli called Grosvenor who specializes in this and calls it amber, but Ramato means copper tinged, correct, in Friuli dialect? Did I do a decent version of defining orange wine? You can tell us about how you made this.
Yeah, these are wines that, to me, I'm just glad to be able to make these things. To me, Pinot Grigio has always been a difficult thing because it's been established as kind of a $12, $11 bottle of wine that's, it doesn't taste, it tastes like apples a little bit sometimes on these kind of versions, but it's not too exciting. And I drink a lot of wine, but if I go out, I rarely would order a Pinot Grigio, because why waste my the glass of wine I'm going to have on something that's just neutral and kind of boring. Obviously, there's some beautiful Pinot Gris from Alsace and North.
No, but for the most part, you're not. It's a non-aromatic variety, like Chardonnay is, and it takes its character from who made it, how they made it, and where it's grown. But it makes complete sense to me. Look at the grapes you're adding to this, though. Highly aromatic, Malvasia Bianca and Sauvignon Blanc.
Well, that was kind of I was trying to solve a problem of having a lot of Pinot Grigio that the owners had planted and not being super excited about making it. Fortunately, I made a Pinot Grigio. We call it Pinot Grigio, but it tastes more like Pinot Gris. It's has more fat and volume to it. And I hated the wine because I just didn't want to make one. And then it got better and better with age. It was 2016. And then all of a sudden I realized I do like Pinot Gris. But by then, I'd already shifted over to making it into a red wine. I met a Australian wine critic, Mike Benny, at a recent conference. And he was a real big proselytizer of the orange wines, the funky wines, and things like that. What I liked when I was in Australia is that they weren't making wines that tasted like kombucha and things, unless they really meant it. They were making wines of intention and effort to make something really interesting. And the ones I tried from the United States had been just kind of like, to me, hobby winemakers making a wine, trying to be different from everybody. And they were—
So more of a trend thing as opposed to,
like
really the end result in mind. I've got to tell you, I've been speaking about the aromatics on it. I don't know this. I love this wine because it completely shakes me out of any comfort zone. It's surprising, but it's not weird. When I smell it, it just smells like beautiful spices, like clove and maybe other baking spices, but savory, not sweet, and not the way oak would express itself. And also on the palate, it's got weight, it's got mouthwatering acidity, but it's lush. And you mentioned that it can handle things like spicy curry and kimchi and Korean food. Can you tell us a little bit about what we're staring at here, how you made it? What's going on here?
So that's just a comparison. The grapes in the foreground are Pinot Grigio on skin. Sometimes we do it in pump overs, but this year I usually do it part pump overs, part punch down. But the ones in the background are normal red grapes. That's what they would look like towards the end of fermentation. The ones in the front are Pinot Grigio, and basically the pink or grayish pink hue has been already, you can see it in the darker grapes on the left-hand side, but they've been pretty much absorbed back into the wine, and they make that copper color. We usually ferment for about 3 weeks. This is my second vintage of it. I did it in 17. And then I skipped 18 because I wasn't sure if it was going to work. And then I can't make enough of it now. So 19, we devoted all our Pinot Grigio to the style.
You're kidding. So, whoa. You don't have to worry about being bored with Pinot Grigio. And what's the total time skin contact?
In the case of the one you're trying right now, about 3 weeks.
Okay.
And only one pump over a day. We're not we're not trying to extract an excess amount of tannins. So it's usually one pump over, and sometimes we just punch the cap, and if and not even mix up the grapes all that much. I'm just trying to it's kind of like tasting a sauce. You just kind of feel it goes, and then eventually it's ripe. We press the grape.
Go ahead.
Skins go into, in the cider or something like that, or compost, and then we put it into a large Stuck, which is a 660 gallon
German barrel, correct?
And so that doesn't really add any kind of like vanilla or anything like that, but it does it rounds the wine out. It typically goes through a malolactic fermentation, which means it softens the acids.
But it's still got a little bit of the white wine tannin, what I'm referring to. And I love the richness of it. It's got great mouthfeel. You have to be pretty proud of this wine. By the way, to put it in a frame of reference, 3 weeks on the skins is not out of the question for red wines, but it's quite unusual for white wines, right, Sean?
Yeah. And this is really quickly, in the 17 version of the Ramato was a lot more, as my friend Thomas Hausman, the new winemaker here, called it, it's more like Mexican Fernet. This is more Campari, I guess. It's a little more perfumey, and but it has those kind of Amaro tea-like characters that I like so much. And the style of wine I came at skeptically, and now I just love it. I've warmed up to it. And to me, you don't have to make orange wines, or how you're going to call them, or natural wines. They don't have to have flaws. You can actually take all that low sulfur or no sulfur, the tannins and other things, and even the elevated acetic acid, but it doesn't have to be something that you have to talk yourself into liking. And that's why I added a little bit of skin fermented Malvasia and Sauvignon Blanc Friuliano. I made that on the side to make a separate wine, but I just, as a lark, combined them, and I was like, oh no, I guess I'm not.
I think I'm glad you're listening to the dance of your inner angels and demons, because they're not leading you astray. I called Sean and I asked him, would you call this natural? Because if you hang tight, everyone, we're going to tell you about our spring wine sale. And we had a category called natural, and I didn't know if I could tuck it in there. And he honestly said he used a little bit of technology, you know, to keep it clean. So probably not. And I really appreciate your saying that, because what did you call yourself? A bio?
Pragmatic.
Yes.
Oh, I'm biopragmatic.
Biopragmatic, because I don't have a problem with the whole, you know, concept of natural, but I do have a problem, you know, with when something smells repulsive, you know, or flawed. You know, I'm not throwing my my collective experience of what is delicious and appealing to human beings out the window, but Ramato definitely does this. Everyone, I know we're running late. You knew we were gonna, but Sean, can you give us the short version? This is a quote unquote open air greenhouse to extend the growing season for all of those lovely red wines you've got planted, correct?
Small percentage of our red wines, actually.
Oh, okay.
So I'd say probably about maybe 10% of our production at the most is.
But it's mostly red here, or do you have a combination of grapes?
No, whites wouldn't serve any purpose. So this is completely Marty Lagina's, the owner's invention creation. He lived over in England. He saw them growing fruit trees and other things under hoop houses like this. He wanted to bring it back here because he wanted to have some bigger, or I wouldn't say bigger, but let's say some more layered. He wanted bigger, but it ended up being more layered reds. And that's the row 7. I think it's Cab Franc and Merlot, and some mixed in vines of Tempranillo and some white grapes, some other things too. And when I first saw those tunnels, I thought that they were really silly. So like we have to grow hoop houses, and why are we even growing grapes here? Then I got the grapes, and they were awesome. But I'm like, if we're going to be doing things under these tunnels, let's go full on weird. So we planted Nebbiolo, Scappuccino, things like that.
Michigan Nebbiolo, that is mind-stopping thought.
Well, you should have seen the Scappuccino producers from Propoto when I was trying it with them. They were just looking at me like they had no, I mean, how would you process that? You're a small town in Italy, and some guys like, oh yeah, I grow them under hoop houses in northern Michigan. So anyways, it's something that we do to get some extra ripeness, some extra continuity of the red wines on a very edgy region. In cooler years, it keeps the temperatures in September and October warm both in day and night, so that we don't have the vines shutting down prematurely, and grapes that have a long ripening cycle will ripen all the way up into November or whenever we decide to pick.
I think it's brilliant and forward thinking. Why not? You know. By the way, before you all start to peel off, I'm going to ask you if you can hang for 60 seconds talking about our spring sale, and then I want to circle back to all these winemakers and have them share a little bit of what's in their heart before we go on to enjoy dinner. But I've got my colleague and friend, Denny Walsh. Denny, can you give us your view about what we're about to promote, a wine sale that's connected to a virtual seminar next Thursday?
So I'll let you talk about the seminar,
Okay.
but a year ago, because of the COVID, we had to cancel our annual luxury tasting in the spring. That morphed into our first spring sale. Next, a week from Thursday, we'll begin our second Plum spring wine sale. It'll go from the 20th to the 30th of May. It'll end on the Sunday before Memorial Day. And that sale will feature in excess of 100 different wines we have 13 different categories, the same types of values and opportunities that you've come to expect from Plum. Again, this year we'll also be offering a special discount that you can plug into.
Not something that we commonly do. So this is a big deal, right?
We do it twice a year, and that'll be available to go live on Thursday, May 20th, and then Friday night, Madeline and myself and the distinguished Mr. Johnson will be talking about these wines and tasting 4 of them. So think ahead to this particular situation. It's going to be starting a week from Thursday. Probably it'll go live around 4 o'clock. And then Friday
Next Thursday, right.
right. And then Friday at 6, we'll have our seminar with Madeline, Rod, myself, and taste through 4 wines and talk in general about the different opportunities for us.
And you'll be getting a list of those wines that we're going to review together at the tasting. That's next Friday. So the sale goes live next Thursday. The tasting is next Friday. By the way, I am absurdly happy tasting Riesling in Peaceport in this picture. So I refuse to let go of that picture, even though it's 10 years old. And Rod would join us tonight, but he's in Cleveland. So we're just going to taste a smattering of wines out of these 100. And we'll take turns just discussing how we feel about them. This is a collection of wines, some of which you've seen in the stores and some of which are new to our culture. But I hope you join us next Friday because it's something off the beaten track. It's not going to be, it'll be heartfelt, but not quite as personal as what you've experienced tonight. So I didn't want to miss sharing this. I'm trying to stop sharing and it's not letting me do it. Here we go. Okay. Thank you, Denny, for going there.
A lot of great Bordeaux.
A lot of great Bordeaux. Yeah. And, a lot of great everything. And great price value relationship, be it $20 or, $100. Plum's culture is such that we don't commonly discount. So for us, because we have really good, frontline prices, something I'm very proud of, that it's, I think, the best value in the store, and you have to go through produce to get to it. And you have to go through the wine department to get to meat in the seafood department. So it all ties in. All righty. Casey, can I circle back to you? You've been waiting patiently, and just what's your final message for all of us? What would you like us to think about?
So we kind of started this conversation, Sean and Charlie and I, yesterday when we were just grouping about this tasting, and I'm really excited about like the long awaited realization that our growing region is a legitimate growing region, and we're finally seeing that excitement in some really major national wine and food and travel publications. And it's, from here I'm like, come on, it's about time. But we really do have all the attributes to make a fantastic growing region. Well-drained soil, a warm growing season. We have those intermittent summer rains from Mother Nature. So we talk about dry farming. We all dry farm here because Mother Nature's providing what we need during the growing season. And then we have lake effect driven winds to create circulation and air movement to help facilitate high quality grapes with low disease impact, and then all of those important influences from the lake and from the big lake, Lake Michigan, and then our inland lakes as well. And it was me who said we're really an inland coastal climate. So I know we share, and it's lovely that we share, the 45th parallel with
but that's not really the big point, right?
No, the big point. Yes. And I think you can really see it when you look at our map, and you just really realize how special Michigan is to be surrounded by these lakes. And, Sean and Charlie both mentioned that they're moving in this direction of organic. Shady Lane, we are too. We just received our SIP certification, which is sustainability in practice. And I think that, with this movement to, these are things that we all hold near and dear. We've all grown up by the water. We've all had, the complete honor of this area and living in its beauty. And I think that, we're finally like kind of like putting putting certain recognition on these practices that we've been working towards and doing. And
You know what, with climate change, maybe Mother Nature will think twice before she throws brutal winters at you guys, you know, because there's moderating lake influence, and then there's 10 to 20 below zero, which, you know, thanks to reading, you know, Sean's interview, I hadn't really intellectualized the fact that, you know, the jet stream's moving from west to east, right?
Exactly.
So it definitely, you know, is a little bit more moderated, but then the New York guys have it better off still. But thank you for those comments, Casey.
The more snow we can get, the better, though.
Yes, snow is good. No, but I'm talking way sub-zero temperatures. Will you tell everyone very quickly why snow is our friend? Because it does what?
Snow is our friend because it actually insulates the vine. So like a cooler would insulate the environment around it, whether it's keeping it warm or keeping it cold. The snow acts in the same way. So the lake as a heat source to extend our fall is advantageous for us, giving us a longer, warmer fall. And then the big lake as a heat sink, which we're kind of moving out of right now, drawing some heat out of the air, kind of like tempering our climate. We really luck out as grape growers, just sneaking by some of those cold detrimental temperatures that can happen in the spring that some of the other crops that grow here, like apples and cherries, don't always sneak by. And so we really luck out, and we're blessed, you know, in that aspect.
We're lucky that you decided to come back from California. Thank you.
Good to be here.
No, it's great to have your company. Talking to the Bel Lago friends, you've got, you know, Charlie, you're looking from the past, and your eye is moving towards, you know, the present and the future. You made a comment that you're impressed with the winemakers up north. Is there anything you want to tell us about that culture, or anything else that you'd like to touch on? Oops, you're muted. Hold on. Just unmute yourself. I do that with regularity. I don't think I can unmute you. You have to unmute. Uh-oh. Just go to the top of your...
There we go.
There we go. Yay. Okay.
I was reading the chat.
No, that's okay. It's a good chat. All y'all, I hope you're paying attention to the chat, because it's very cool.
It was a very good chat. So anyway, I just wanted to follow up on something that Casey said. You know, she talked about the recognition of the region. And of course, since I've been involved in the industry for so long, it's been really fun to watch that evolution. And one of the nice things is that we're starting to be able to recognize wines from the region. The folks that pay attention can recognize the hallmarks of wines from this region, which for me are just that bright acidity and the bright aromatics that we get in the wines that aren't really easy for some regions to duplicate. And so we're starting to get our own identity, I hope, on the world stage.
And from what you told me earlier, I mean, you're all of you are playing with, lot special individual lot production, so that when you are producing, 7 different lots of Cabernet Franc from different vineyards, using exactly the same winemaking technique, there is perceptible difference. So it's beyond up north, it's beyond lake effect, right?
Oh, sure. Yeah, it's of course. Yeah, we talked about that briefly yesterday. When we did make those wines, and we tasted them separately, and it was really interesting. And I was really pleased to see that as well. But those sorts of things give us these really marvelous opportunities to blend wines that are really unique. And we do that all the time. We've got, we actually have several vineyards at Bel Lago that we source grapes from, and then we buy grapes from a couple of vineyards in addition to that. And it's all the love of winemaking is also based around the creativity and the idea of imagining something and then moving in the direction to create it. It's sort of like writing, it's sort of like painting. And
Well,
you know,
you've got an artistic soul by many people's measure. And to that point, I'm just curious what Blake is imagining going forward, you know, beyond the platform that has been provided for him. Blake, where's your gleeful creativity going in your head?
Well, first thing that comes to mind is this evolving customer that we are beginning to see to some extent. That for a long time, I mean, I've been here for 10 years, which has probably been the fastest growing part of the history of the wine industry. It's really blowing up. I mean, probably over 10 wineries have appeared since I've started working here, including Mari. They're pretty new on the block, although well established now. But with that increased interest of the consumer, that's why we're able to keep growing like this. And at some point, it's got to sort of level off how many wineries up here. But it seems like we're getting consistent tourism. But in my experience, we are also seeing a better educated customer to some extent. And part of that is reoccurring customers that maybe the first time they come up, they go up Old Mission, which has more bang for its buck, and they see Mari, which is like a castle.
An Italian castle, right?
That's what makes them fall in love with coming up here. And then next time they're like, maybe I'll go off the beaten path, and they'll accidentally pop by this side of the county, which, I mean, we're a half-hour drive from Traverse City. You can do it in less, of course, but
you know what, from what you're saying, what just occurred to me is this educated consumer is probably encouraging you to keep your bar really high, you know, not to dumb it down by anybody's measure. And also your wines are being celebrated in restaurants like Amanda's, and I know how high her bar is in terms of having access to what she considers some of the best wines up north. But we sure celebrate you, and I find it very touching that you and Charlie are truly a team. I don't think you're in anyone's shadows, Blake. You know, you seem to be like your own man. But I'm looking to see what your handprint will be on the wines there. So we're very happy to get to know you.
yeah.
And
Obviously, I'm here, but if you haven't been here in a while, the new owners, it's been about 2 years, and there's been a very significant investment in kind of updating the tasting room. So that's one really cool thing about what we got going on here. We've always been committed to the wine, and the wine quality has been there, but now there's a little bit more substantial tasting room. We've expanded the size of it. I'm sitting on the patio right now. Charlie, I can see him through the window. He's inside.
oh, and you've got pizza. You've got a pizza oven. I just heard about that.
We do.
Cool pizza oven. And that's cool because we're teaming with a local Folgarelli's in Traverse City, who's just a small store that sells sandwiches and stuff. So they can make the pizza for us, freeze them, and then all we have to do is throw them in the oven. And normally frozen pizza is edible, but not always fantastic. But these things
elevates frozen pizza. Yes.
Yeah, it's comparative to, going to the restaurant down the street. They're actually really good quality.
I'll be there. I think I'll taste cider before I taste wine with your pizza. So when I get to meet you. Okay, Sean, you get the parting shot. I know you could talk. What rabbit hole is your mind going into right now about your own future? You said so many cool things when we were chatting. You said at one point that it's a great time to be a winemaker and not from California.
There's two ways to go with that. One is that disaster is part of our conversation as humanity right now. We talk about global warming.
Right. The last year.
5 permanent fires in the West Coast or Australia, droughts and things. Well, Michigan just happens to be really cold winters. And so part of our terroir is that, and how we react to it is whether we, get better at making cider in some years or bring the tanker trucks in from California. But on the other note of just what's happening in the whole bit and all that, it is a good time to be a winemaker. And I think the hipsters, whether it be the 20-year-old or the 80-year-old hipsters, the ones that basically, when I grew up, I mean, to me, people that, drink Amaros and eat kale and things like that, they've opened up new flavors and tastes. Kombucha, I made jokes about, but it's a flavor profile that people recognize acetic acid and all that. And these are all flavors that were verboten before, and now they're ones that they can be used when you carefully. But it made like white wines with tannin is amazing. I don't just make Ramato. I make my Pinot Blanc. I do addition of like 6% of Friuliano fermented for about 60 days on skim to add it back instead of putting it into a barrel to build texture. That wine wouldn't have sold 10 years ago. The gatekeepers, the Robert Parkers, the Tanzers, and other people, they've always ignored us, and they still do. But the hipster generation, whatever it might be, the internet generation, the people
Social media generation, right?
It means all age groups have allowed us that I can actually just be weird and eccentric on these wines and make great wines and not have to be something that Mark Shankin's going to get all excited about because I have a full page ad in his magazine.
But you're making delicious wines, that needs to be said. And also, you're also not making, you don't need to move 20,000 cases of Who's-Its at,
it helps
$75 a bottle.
Winery here too, I mean, to be realistic, but we're there. And, if I have to tolerate people wearing, athletic socks on a unicycle with a monocle, they're my people. I'm all about it. Because when I grew up here, I remember people driving by in the Chevy Nova and throwing their old beer bottle at me. And yeah, I like the modern times this way. So they buy our wines. They like the weird labels. Someone made a question in the on the comments. It's easier to sell. I've always found it easier to sell wine in New York City and Chicago than it has been in Michigan.
Isn't that something?
It really changed recently when James Rigato of Maple Grave brought a whole bunch of this next generation of wine buyers and things up to Maury. And we sat down and we just kind of had why are all the restaurants buying spirits, and beer and ciders from Michigan,
but not wine, right?
And so we sat down and we that one meeting, like, oh, you really should come down and visit Detroit, by the way. Like, I'm not going back there. And then I didn't realize what's going on down there. So it's exciting time. I mean, COVID's kind of put a halt on things, but to me, one of the best things that any winemaker up here can do is invest time down in the Detroit area, because
you just ripped the words out of my mouth, because the reality is you have to get it in people's hands. And when you have the combination of the wine being in the glass and meeting you and talking to you, and by you, I mean all y'all, right? It is a dangerous combination because it can turn the tide instantly, and when you have wines that are creative and where you've ignored boundaries that were taken for granted, right? And all of a sudden there's something that's as cutting edge as anything coming out of Northern Michigan. I find that thrilling. So to that point, I want to ask, I know we have, if anyone else wants to chime in, you've all hanging in with this terrific conversation. Amanda, do you have any thoughts, or Dave Boss is out there as well. It's just been a terrific dialogue. And great comment from Amanda. The wine has to be good, not just weird. Right. You know what? To your point, Amanda, I don't drink wine with my mind. I mean, seriously, the wine was my first teacher. I had no internet. I had nothing. I had the wine and the guests and the work. And the wine has never betrayed me, because when I'm tasting wine, I'm not thinking. I'm speaking the wine's silent language, man. It's party, right? And when it delivers balance and interest and fruit and deliciousness, and it lingers, rock and roll, I interrupted you. Sorry, go for it.
No, it's and like I said, I had you, and you told me that probably 25 years ago. The first question you asked, is it good wine, right? And that's always the first question. And I love, and Casey is definitely pushing the envelope, as Sean's pushing the envelope. I haven't had the opportunity to taste some of the newer things coming out of Belago, but
they're gonna now.
I'm driving up there tomorrow, so get ready, Charlie. But But I'm not kidding. I will, I mean, Saturday. I won't, no, I'll wait till Monday. But the thing that both of like those wines are doing, and even Charlie, who pushed the envelope early on with things like Auxerrois, and
Right.
it's, the wine is always good. And how many of the quote unquote natural, which is totally no definition, by the way, right? Orange, whatever, pet nat, whatever, all of these things have existed for years, but there are some really horrendous examples. And it doesn't mean that there's so many wonderful examples as well. And that to me, and it works both ways. I mentioned earlier is that, you know, Pinot Grigio has become a brand. So even on the other end where there's nothing weird, where it's insipid and boring and moderate everything, and it could be an unoaked Chardonnay as easily as it's a Pinot Grigio, as long as it's $11.99 a bottle, who cares? It goes both ways. And at the end of the day, is a good wine. And to me, I love when people are willing to push the envelope. And I think that the open-mindedness of this younger generation, or just call them hipsters, like Sean said, whether they're, you know, 25 or 85, but the open-mindedness is very, very much appreciated. And
there's a fierce interest also.
Totally.
And that's where the energy comes from, a fierce interest. They want to know what you're doing, why you're doing it, you know?
And I want there to be that clear definition, but is it good? Because it gets, I love that. Like the Ramato is one of my favorite wines and it ages beautifully. And I made a comment about the 2016 Pinot Grigio, which was made completely straight-laced in every way. And it ages well, which is very, very cool.
You just made me feel very hip, because that's the last thing I ever feel, because I went back and forth about what Mari wine to show. And I thought, I talked about it with Mike Pfeiffer and I said, we got to show the Ramato because it's so cool.
Gruner Veltliner to me that's one of the best still examples of the Gruner Veltliner that's ever been made in this region, since the first person that made still Gruner Veltliner is the one that we tasted when my staff was with you, Casey. It was extraordinary.
I'm clinking 3 glasses because I think we did a killer job picking out these 3 wines.
I'm drinking Casey's Blaufränkisch right now, by the way.
All of my glasses, by the way, when I look at them, are evenly almost empty. So you know how what people say and what they do are 2 different things. You know, I am equally intrigued by all 3 of these, and you'll see why we put the bubbles in the middle, because it's very interesting going back and forth when you have that textural change. We're, you know, half an hour over. It was glorious. Thank you so much for your company, not just the winemakers, but everyone here. It was a killer chat room. We should do this again. Yes. And Amanda, yes. I'm coming up north. I promise you. I'm bringing Michelle because it's been too long.
I already have the whole tour planned.
Oh, yeah. Well, I can just punch out and pay attention to the wine.
Exactly.
I just hope that your experience at City recently is not the reason you come back in so long. We put you to work for so hard.
No. I'm just lazy, right? Mike Pfeiffer, you know, you've been very quiet in the background. Any parting notes from you? Mike's our wine team leader at our Ann Arbor West, and really our strongest supporter of Michigan wines.
No, I will say this: I think the interest in Michigan wines is broadening. I think the quality of Michigan wines is excelling greatly. I was surprised to see some varietals that I didn't expect to have great quality. We stopped in and saw Sean, but the Sauvignon Blancs up there, whether it be global warming or whatever, are really starting to show up. I think that you guys realize that Michigan does what Michigan does, and I think that's what you need to concentrate on, and not try to be California or Burgundy or Bordeaux, and just be Michigan. And you know, as long as you do that, I'm interested. I'm interested in Ramato. I'm interested in the natural wines. You know, Sean, your Simplicissimus is one of my favorites, and it's just, you guys are doing a fantastic job year after year. The quality's getting better, and bravo.
Well said. And I'm going to put a bow on this by saying, classicist that I am, because I think quality, real quality, bears the test of time, and is quality whether it's 1975 or 2040. Bellago's Pinot Noirs rock me, because I put my nose in the glass and there it is. You know,
I will,
it's
Madeline,
the real deal.
Real quick with that, you know, Rod is it's great when Rod describes it as Burgundian in style.
Oh my God, that's like,
yeah.
the cosmos has just spoken.
If you have not had Charlie's Pinot Noir
Mhm.
and Blake's Pinot Noir, go get a bottle because it is truly fantastic.
Yo,
Thank you.
This was special. Thanks, everyone. Really, look forward to seeing you soon. Please join us next week. So it's Friday, not Thursday next week, 6:30. The sale starts on Thursday. And boy, this sure made me feel good about living and working in Michigan. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Madeline.
Take good care. Bye.
Thank you.